Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be. My name is Chris Simmons, attorney at law, and today we're going to fact check a map. Now, this map was brought to my attention after I saw it retweeted by Julian Assange, and I checked on it because it was the first time I'd ever seen this map. It turns out it is making its round among conservative outlets, particularly those that are very anti-immigration, the alt-right, people of that nature. So I wanted to verify it. I wanted to check on the source. I wanted to see how accurate this map actually is. So I looked at the source material and I found out that, well, it's not really that accurate. So first of all, let's go ahead and get this out of the way. Where's this data coming from? Well, it's coming from the Federation for American Immigration Reform, and the original map was posted on howmuch.net. So, what is the Federation for American Immigration Reform? Well, FAIR, by its own words, is a nonpartisan public interest organization of concerned Americans united in the belief that our immigration policies and laws should again serve the nation's future needs. Our mission is to seek to reduce overall immigration to a more normal level, reducing legal immigration levels from well over 1 million presently to 300,000 a year over a sustained period will allow America to manage growth, address environmental concerns, and maintain a high quality of belief. They believe that immigration within proper limits can be positive. Adhering to the rules of law is central to successful assimilation and citizenship. Tough decisions require strong leadership. Strong leadership, in turn, is underscored by defined principles that anchor public policy. Here's the beautiful one. Immigration can be an emotional topic. We believe in respecting the basic human rights and dignity of all involved. As such, FAIR opposes policies based on favoritism toward or discrimination against any person based on race, color, religion, or gender. We understand that under any rational system of ordered entry, the demand will always vastly exceed available slots. Tough decisions will therefore always be necessary. It's very positive. It seems like a very positive thing that they're saying. But they are anti-immigration. They want stricter immigration. As you'll see with the basis of this, they are very much against all illegal immigration. And in fact, their definition of illegal immigration is a lot greater than is normally accepted. But that's from their own words. Now, I had heard about FAIR beforehand. While I was setting up my law firm, I was looking through kind of immigration news RSS feeds, and FAIR kept coming up. I chose not to add those and go for a more neutral source for various reasons, but I've heard of FAIR before. I did not know this about them. Apparently, the Southern Poverty Law Center classifies FAIR as a hate group. The Federation for American Immigration Reform is a group with one mission: to severely limit immigration into the United States. Although FAIR maintains a veneer of legitimacy that has allowed its principals to testify in Congress and lobby the federal government, this veneer hides much ugliness. A statement from the founder: as whites see their power and control over their lives declining, will they simply go quietly into the night, or will there be an explosion? I've come to the point of view that for European American society and culture to persist requires a European American majority, and a clear one at that. So, I'll leave this in the description for you to read. I do not take the fact that they are classified as a hate group by SPLC as a reason to completely discredit the information out of it, but it does inform you as to their goal and to their possible biases. So it is important to remember it in context, but do not discredit the information based strictly upon this. That would be poor form. So now that we know who FAIR is, where the data is coming from, we're going to go back to the map. So what does it show? State-by-state costs of illegal immigration, excluding federal costs. So when we go through the data, we're not going to deal with the federal section unless it's otherwise referenced. Who does it cover? Costs of illegal aliens and their children to state taxpayers. This is important. They're kids. This is highly important to the data. I will explain why when we get to it. Finally, let's look at the numbers. They are huge. They are big. They are scary if you strip them of context, which this map pretty much has. If you see this map, these are huge expenditures. We shouldn't be paying that much. That's a massive amount. Except it leaves out the fact that the budgets are huge in a lot of these states. I, on the other hand, believe in context and will provide it freely. Now, I got these numbers. These are the state budgets for 2017. Generally, I think there's a few 2016, 2015. I got them from a Wikipedia page. I will freely admit that. So they may be slightly inaccurate, but I did not want to go through every state budget to find the total. So Wikipedia served my purpose here. This is the total that is on the map. These are all in billions. These are a mixture of million and billion. And this is the percentage of the budget. Now, if you'll notice, there are some large percentages. 13.4 in California, 10.5 in Georgia, 10.3 in Texas, 9.1 in Oklahoma, 8.9 in New Jersey. But there are also some really small ones. 0.3%, 0.8%, 0.4%, 1.5%, there's a 1% somewhere in here. 0.5, 0.6, 0.5. Overall, the average, using their own numbers, ranges from about 1.3% to about 3.6, 3.7% of the budget. They normally fall within that range. I don't know if that's factually accurate, but that's what it seemed like to me as I was doing the calculations. I haven't actually averaged these to find the actual average percentage. But I wanted to show that to you. I wanted you to understand that there is context to this, and these numbers are not actually as large as they seem, even using their data. Now, here's the thing. These numbers are also inaccurate, highly inaccurate. They should be much lower. So even these percentages are way too high. But we'll get into that when we get into the data. Finally, before we move on, I want to give you a little bit more background. While I was doing research, this has been fact-checked. PolitiFact has done a fact check. There's been a few others. I will link this in the description below. I did a little bit of this reading to get a general overview, but I wanted to do an independent, so my notes come from the actual document rather than PolitiFact. Although if you read the article, I'm fairly sure a lot of the sources and a lot of the information within this will be covered as well in my notes. So I just wanted to let you know that is the background. There are other places that have fact-checked this, so just be aware of that. Again, all this will be linked below so you can read it in full. That way you don't have to just take my word. So we're going to actually get into this now. As I did with the Jennings versus Rodriguez case, I'm going to put the source material on the left over here and my notes on the right. That way you can read ahead, read along, or You can listen if you prefer, but this is just to help make sure that everything I say is clear. When you see this, you'll see document 7. That means what page in the document up here. Page, that means what page is actually shown, the page number down here. And paragraph, if there is a specific paragraph. So let's start with who is an illegal alien. And to start that, we go to document 7, page 3, paragraphs 4 and 5. Now if you notice right here, fares estimates have been relatively close, but slightly larger than those produced by groups like Pew Research Center, etc. However, for ideological reasons, Pew and similar groups classify the large influx of unaccompanied minors, UAMs, temporary protected status, TPS, recipients, and deferred action of childhood arrivals, DACA, beneficiaries as being in the United States legally. FAIR disagrees with this characterization. Recipients of TPS, DACA, etc. have not received lawful immigration status, as that term is commonly understood. Rather, as a matter of administrative convenience, the U.S. government recognizes that these individuals are unlawfully present and declines to take immediate action against them. This is not factually accurate. So already we're starting this off. It's always a poor sign when you start off for ideological reasons and then misquote the law. Unaccompanied minors do not accrue unlawful presence. Now, from a technical point, yeah, you could consider them quote-unquote illegal immigrants, but they don't accrue any unlawful presence, so it's often not a giant concern, and unlawful presence is part of the requirement for deportation. Does that mean they can't be deported? No, but it means they're less of a concern. TPS and DACA, however, well, that's a whole different story. FAIR is factually inaccurate. The TPS is congressional approval for immigrants to stay here. In fact, they get work authorization. DACA is the same. You do not accrue unlawful presence time if you have TPS or you have DACA. You are not you don't have a path to citizenship, but as long as you have one of those two programs covering you, you are authorized to be here. Generally, if you're going to travel outside the country, you might want to get a waiver, but I mean, you can leave the country and come back without triggering a ban a lot of times. So they're just factually incorrect here. So they've already started off on the wrong foot. Now we're going to go to the next page, and we're going to get to the children part, which I mentioned was highly important, and it's going to be highly important through this entire thing. I'm going to harp on about it constantly. So, first paragraph of the next page, the overall population that we analyze for purposes of determining the cost of illegal immigration also includes about 4.2 million American-born minor children of illegal aliens. Although the U.S. Constitution, de jure, meaning in law, I skipped something. Although U.S.-born children of illegal aliens are, under the current interpretation of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, de jure U.S. citizens. So they're counting U.S. citizens in among illegal immigrants. They are also typically targeted low-income children. They're also making some assumptions here. But we'll skip assumptions. I'm going to take offense with the U.S. citizen part. So they do this in a very dishonest way, and you'll see this throughout this document. I'm going to explain it now and then show it as we go through. I'm okay with them adding these U.S. citizen children in among the illegal aliens for their reason if they do it in a both fair, accurate, and honest way. They don't. They instead use U.S. citizen children to boost the cost, but they ignore them whenever they come to the matter of offsetting the costs of illegal immigration. And you'll notice this a lot, and they do this a lot. They do everything in their power to enhance the costs, but deflate the offsets. Another thing that I have an issue with is that they don't define this well. On first glance, this may seem well defined. It's American-born minor children of illegal aliens. But do they count them if one of the parents was a U.S. citizen? Do they count them if one of the parents was a lawful permanent resident or a lawful alien and the other parent was an illegal alien? They never define this. So we don't know exactly the exact type. We're just going to lump, if you are associated at all with an illegal alien, we're going to lump you into this. And that's going to be kind of a pattern. So, next, we're going to skip on down to where this actually starts with the states. It starts on document 38 is where the actual information is. You can see where they got the numbers: 23 billion, 10 billion, 8 billion, 6 billion. No, that's a 6. So you can see this is where they got the numbers. You can see the amount of illegal aliens that they include, how they do the kids, the costs of per taxpayer to state taxpayers. So that's how this breaks down. But we're actually going to start here with education. Now you'll notice my notes. Sometimes I'll read these directly. Sometimes they are just there for me to remind myself. So I may or may not read everything on there, but they are there in case you want to read my notes. But let's start with public education. Well, here's the first problem. Many require additional limited English proficiency assistance during their academic career. But they just make this assumption that nearly all of them do. They actually reference, it's back in the federal, they reference this number, they reference a number of, I believe it's 74.39 or something % of illegal immigrants need LEP. I looked into that, and the only information I could find was from an internal discussion, like an internal study. So they're referencing themselves, and as we've already determined, they don't really accurately reflect what a quote-unquote illegal alien is and who they are. Additionally, the study within that they reference, I couldn't find a direct reference to that number, and I didn't look into it too hard, so maybe it is in there and I just missed it, but I didn't see a direct reference, and I couldn't figure out where they were getting that number from their own study. So they're either really not clear or they're fudging numbers. But anyways, they pretty much just presume that all of these people are going to need this program. They presume that they're all going to need it to the same extent in terms of cost, so they calculate the cost. And again, they're adding U.S. children to this, U.S. citizen children. So they're inflating cost. When we get down to post-secondary tuition, they're talking a lot about DACA recipients as this. These are people who have authorization to be here. They're not, it's kind of a gray area in terms of whether they're legal or illegal. They have no path to citizenship, but they're authorized to be here. And that's why they're not really normally counted among these types of studies, but it is here. It's used to inflate. But my biggest issue with all of this, at least so far, is that every serious economist considers education an investment that pays for itself. If you invest in a child's education, yeah, kids are costly. U.S. citizen kids are costly. We spend a ton on children. But it's an investment. It pays for itself. It pays later down the road. So it's kind of disingenuous when we get to the offsets and it's not in there. So I'll show you exactly, but so far they're just using every tool to inflate their costs while, well, we haven't got to the offsets, but you'll see that they use every tool not to deflate them. So next we get to medical costs. Now, I don't remember exactly where this quote is within this section, but I know it's on page 40, or document page 45. I don't know exactly where at in here, but the quote is, "And many of those who do have health insurance do not have comprehensive plans, leaving them uncovered for certain ailments." This is fair hand-waving away the use of insurance because they never explain what's not covered in these non-comprehensive plans. They basically go, well, some illegal immigrants do have insurance, but it's not comprehensive. So because it's not comprehensive, it doesn't cover everything, so we're going to lump them in with these costs. But they don't explain what's not covered. They just say it and then lump them in to inflate the costs of medical expenses. If you want to do this, explain, well, you know, a broken arm is covered, but the flu is not covered. You know, if you hurt your back, you're covered under the insurance, but you know what? Cancer's not. Are these uncovered expenses regular expenses made by immigrants? Like, is there a giant problem with these uncovered expenses, or are the uncovered expenses pretty typical? We don't know because they never tell us. They never explain it. They just say it, and then it's essentially a take our word for it. But they use that as a reason to do the math that they do. So it's highly dishonest, and it's omitting facts that you really need. And that's a key thing throughout this entire thing. They're omitting facts. But let's start with the Medicaid births. Now they reference the federal part, so we're going to go back up to the federal just to look. But up here, you'll notice that they immediately conflate both illegal alien mothers with foreign-born mothers. So what they do is essentially say, this is all about illegal aliens, but we're going to count foreign-born mothers here too. Foreign-born does not mean illegal. Foreign-born, they don't define it actually, but foreign-born could mean illegal aliens, lawful permanent residents, people here on a visa, people here studying, and foreign-born U.S. citizens. We don't actually know because they never tell us. But they've lumped them in with illegal aliens. Now, I'm going to make a presumption. There is a footnote here. I will admit I didn't look exactly at that, but please fact check me on this. But my presumption is that when they say foreign-born mothers, they're not counting U.S. citizens as part of this, but they could be counting lawful permanent residents. They could be counting people here on a visa, people here studying, working, etc. But these are not the same. So it's a little bit of a dishonest tactic here. Additionally, in here, Medicaid paid for 45% of all births in 2010. Presuming that Medicaid also paid for 45% of all births in 2015, so we don't have data on that. That's fine. It covered the cost of about 392 births for foreign-born mothers. Again, conflating. So here's two problems. I'm going to point out two problems. Again, there's a conflation of foreign-born mothers with illegal aliens. I will harp on that until it's made perfectly clear. But the other problem is, if we're only talking about illegal alien mothers, we can't use that 45% number because under the U.S. Chamber of Commerce putting out a myths and facts page, this is an official government fact check here. If we go down to, I have it in my notes, document page 10. If we go down here, undocumented immigrants are not eligible for federal public benefits such as Medicaid. So, does that mean that no quote-unquote illegal immigrant was covered under Medicaid? No. But it does mean that we can't use a similar rate. To use a similar rate is highly dishonest and simply inflating your costs further. So, do I know the actual rate? No, but I'm not the one making the claim. They are. And that's the beauty of this. They've made the claims, but their evidence doesn't hold up. So we're going to go back down there. So, additionally, if you'll notice, Medicaid births, improper Medicaid payments. It seems they're double dipping here. This is obviously going to be lower than this number because this is a fraction of it, but they don't actually say, are Medicaid births taken out of this already? Or are they included in this? It's unclear. So, taking it at its best, this is a contradiction to this, because this number assumes the 45% are the 45% number, which is just factually inaccurate. But for it to be factually accurate, the Medicaid expenses would have to be legal. Here, they don't. Fraudulent use. So it's double dipping. It's kind of a contradiction. I'm not going to harp on it too much, but just understand that there's the possibility here of further inflation, which is not out of context given the rest of this document so far. And finally, Medicaid for U.S.-born kids of illegal aliens. First of all, these U.S. citizen kids are entitled to Medicaid. Second of all, they're counting this towards undocumented immigrants, but they're not going to count these same people against them. So I will explain that, but again, I'm just going to harp on that point because it's so readily apparent throughout this entire thing. So far, we've inflated by a lot. Next, we get to the administration of justice. Now, here's a couple of points for this. First of all, I've checked this one. This doesn't lead to a study. It's a broken link, so I can't really check these without doing some Googling myself. I'll admit I didn't do it. If someone wants to do it, please do. Please fact check me. Get these numbers. Corroborate these particular numbers for me. I would greatly appreciate it. But here's the other thing. Even if those numbers are correct, they're blaming immigrants on a lot of things and making a lot of general assumptions. For instance, some of the fiscal costs relate to police operations in response to criminal activity by illegal aliens, especially in municipalities where gang activity and drug trafficking is rampant. They are presuming that the presence of a quote-unquote illegal alien is going to correlate with an increase in gang activity and drug trafficking. Basically, a lot of this is saying that they're implying that illegal aliens are more prone to gang activity, or more prone to drug trafficking, or more prone to crime than non-illegal aliens or U.S. citizens. They never actually support this data anywhere. In fact, data shows that immigrants are less violent than U.S. citizens. It also doesn't cover, is this purely for illegal immigrants, or are these police costs associated with areas where they're going for U.S. citizens and they just happen to get illegal aliens? It's a very incomplete picture. And we need more data. We need more information. They don't provide it to us, however. They just say it, and we're to assume it's true. Because they've provided no data, we can dismiss with no data. Kind of the way I will link a study that shows what I was talking about, but if I had not, you can dismiss that claim without data. It works the same way with me. Other expenditures involve pretrial detention, court hearings, probation of illegal aliens who stand accused of criminal offenses. The costs are significantly higher than average because of the frequent need for a bilingual court service program. They don't provide any data on how often this is needed. This is a standard option. It also presumes that it is entirely needed. Do a lot of them need it? Probably, but we don't know because they don't provide data. Also, it is a normal operating expense paid for by the government. U.S. citizens need it. Non-illegal immigrants need it. What is the increased cost? How much more does it cost? We do not know. Finally, the cost of state and local incarceration. Is this different than regular U.S. citizens? I'm just curious. As far as I know, this is the exact same. So I mean, sure, but is that a huge problem? I mean, we're only talking about costs, but still. This is mostly me nitpicking, but it's mostly because I don't have data to really do anything with. Um, Finally, I have it down here that you can see the bias in the wording of this, especially with California. I, I'm not gonna harp on this because this we're almost to the fun part. So we're gonna skip down to welfare programs, child care, and this counts U.S. children. I'm not going to go through this because the point remains. Temporary assistance for needy families. They talk about how TANF programs are widely available. They don't. They aren't available for illegal immigrants, but they are available to U.S. children. Again, they're U.S. citizens. They have a right to it. But again, children. Meals in school. Again, children. I want to point out all of these things can be considered investments, and most people would consider them investments. Most people consider costs on children to be investments rather than costs. Does it mean that we don't spend money on it? No. It means that we will get the money back. That's why I point out children. And finally, we come to the end of this. So we have a total state and local expenditure of $88,992,981,032. This is highly inflated. This is highly inflated, as we've seen. But that's fine if it's highly inflated if they do the same with the offsets. And now we're going to get into it. This one I'm mostly going to be sticking to my notes because there's a lot in here. So, a couple of things. They base their offsets on a few things. Wage suppression, which is refuted by the Chamber of Commerce on document page 4. Immigrants give a slight boost to the average wages of Americans by increasing their productivity and stimulating investment. They do not drive down wages. They inflate the amount of remittance payments by taking Mexico's 10% and then comparing it to the highest ones, Honduras and Guatemala, and 30%. If you'll give me just 1 second, I will find that right here. However, since illegal aliens typically have a large number of dependents who remain in their home country than legal alien households, that's a fairly large assumption, but let's just take it as true. It is likely that their average rate of remittance is significantly higher. Likely. Likely means I don't have data to prove this, I'm making an assumption. When you see likely, be wary. For example, while Mexico sits on the lower end of the scale, just over 10% of immigrants' average immigrant income remitted, those originally hailing from Honduras and Guatemala send home 30%. So, they're comparing Mexico and Honduras and Guatemala. Therefore, FAIR estimates that on average, illegal alien households remit closer to 20%. This is inaccurate. This is dishonest. What they're doing is taking, okay, here's the low end, here's the high end, we're just going to cut it down the middle and say that's the average. That's not how this works. If they were doing this honestly, they would take and find out the remittance rate for each country and then do an actual average. Instead, they've gone, okay, here's Mexico, which I don't know if it's even the lowest. They just say it's on the low end. It's on the lower end of the scale. And Honduras and Guatemala, again, I don't know if that's the high end, if that's the highest, I don't know. But they take 2 points of data, cut it in the middle and say, there's your average. That's not how averages work. This is dishonest. So they're already on a dishonest part here in a way that they're doing to lower the amount of taxable income. I don't know the actual rate. I don't know the actual average. Someone would need to actually do the math on that. But it could be higher, it could be lower. I don't know, but they've done it in a dishonest way. So they're basically intentionally omitting a lot of data to get away with this. They also entirely focus on tax receipts. Everything in here is taxes. This is tax collected. They never, ever address non-taxation based economic growth attributed to undocumented immigrants. It's not impossible to do. In fact, there are plenty of scholarly articles. There are plenty of people who study this. And even if you want to cherry pick, even if you want to be dishonest and cherry pick the worst case scenario where undocumented immigrants contribute the least to economic growth, it would be more honest than what they do, which is intentionally leave out all of that. So to omit it is to be entirely dishonest. Additionally, it doesn't appear to credit any of the contributions made by the U.S. children of undocumented immigrants to the undocumented immigrants in this section. So what that means is that they've used children to inflate the costs that the states are paying, but they are not counting those same individuals when it comes to the benefits. That's why I kept saying that education and investment in children is seen as an investment because it pays back. But they are purposely omitting the benefits of that investment and focusing entirely on the costs. It's kind of like saying, you know what, if you spend I don't know, you spend $10,000 a year on your retirement fund and leave out all the rest of it. That's just a $10,000 expenditure. And it's pretending like you're never going to get that back in any way. So what they've done is they've included a group of people for the costs, but they've excluded them for the offsets. They also failed to address the cost of removing undocumented immigrants, which would cost Americans hundreds of billions of dollars. This is from the Center for American Progress. You can judge you can judge your bias on that, but their numbers state that to remove the 11.3 million people that are unauthorized, it would cost $114 billion. They also point out that the AAF, the American Action Forum, which is a conservative group, will argue that it'd take 20 years to accomplish, with a full cost of $420 billion and $620 billion, somewhere between those two. But that's the thing. That's only what we have now. Removing people doesn't keep people from entering again. So that number's gonna increase as more people come in. So they've presented this is the cost to us every year without it presenting how much it would actually cost to remove. So from a cost-benefit analysis, keeping them is better than deporting them. They also don't account for the economic loss. When we deport millions of workers, those jobs don't automatically pop up, like Americans don't automatically fill them. we don't get immediate legal immigration to fill them. We don't. There are studies. I'll link an article from California in which they got rid of undocumented immigrants. They tried to get Americans to do the job at higher wages, and they still couldn't. So they're not accounting for the loss of economic value of those lost jobs. They're not accounting for that. And finally, they fail to account for the benefits associated with investment in education. They count as a cost. I've already said that. But they pretty much omit everything that's not taxation. And they do everything they can to suppress the amount of taxation available. They don't account for when you have an undocumented immigrant work for you. You pay a wage, you sell that thing, that thing gives you money, you use that money. That's kind of how our economy functions. They completely leave this out. And again, it's not entirely impossible to figure this stuff out. Plenty of people do. So overall, this entire study is dishonest. It's overinflating costs. It's undervaluing the offsets. It's completely omitting data. It's completely wrong. And therefore, this map is completely wrong. And these percentages are way too high. So, next time you see this map, understand that it's very flawed and that it should not be taken seriously. So, but don't take my word for it. Read it yourself. Read it with the knowledge of the biases of the organization. Read it from an objective point, from a critical point. Judge for yourself. Check my sources. Fact check me. I encourage that because I'm not always right, but when I'm wrong, I prefer to be fact checked rather than just accepted. So that's this map. I figure I would do this little video while I was preparing for my free speech video. So we'll get into that hopefully next time, and I'll see you in the next video.